Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about Flesh by David Szalay, which I finished a couple days ago. This is the second book I've ever read of Szalay's, and it's up for the Booker this year. And I have a lot to say about it, so it's going to be one of the only, I don't know if I've ever done a video on just one book, but that's the plan for today. I did finish this book, The Blindness of the Heart, which is a German novel, won the German Book Prize maybe a decade ago. And I'm finishing up Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence, so I'll have another video on those two books very soon. But this book was just so incredible. If you saw my review of Turbulence by David Szalay, which was sort of like 12 interconnected short stories, each taking place on or like right before or after a flight, and was written for BBC to like be read on air actually. You know, I've been just like really obsessed with his style, which is very sparse at times. He uses a lot of line breaks, which add a sort of rhythm to the writing that I really enjoy. I'm going to read some sections from the book, so maybe you can get a sense of that. I don't know if it'll like be clear, like as I'm reading it, where the line breaks are, but I think it will, because that rhythm is so important to me, and I feel like his books really move at a level that it's just really realistic, and I don't think a lot of books are able to accomplish that, the way that the moment carries itself in real time. I'm going to do a sort of plot breakdown as best I can. This takes place over the span of like 60-ish years, and it's broken up into 10 chapters, most of which are pretty long. I do want to start by talking about the ending, because I just finished it, fresh in my mind, and I think that was maybe the part where I really realized how much I love this book, because the style that he uses is very repetitive. I think I do like to see a sort of shift between, more sparse writing here, bigger descriptions here, not moving through so much time in this section if you're going to do it in that section, those sorts of things. But I think it proved very effective once I finished the book, because I was it just kind of like, it hit me out of nowhere, the very end of the book, which does not end with the end of his life, which is kind of like what I was expecting, but it does end sort of at this moment that really makes you reflect all the way to the beginning, which takes place when he's like 14 or 15 and is kind of experiencing puberty for the first time, liking girls for the first time, the sort of social dynamics that come along with being a teenage boy. You don't really realize how much time has passed, and it almost felt like reaching the end of a life and being like, oh my God, how did this happen? And as somebody who is, 21 years old, it was kind of an astounding feeling, because it was like, that's almost how I imagine, if I'm lucky enough to be, 70 years old, being like, where the hell did all these years go? And that was exactly what it felt like. And so going back through each chapter, you're sort of looking at, a lot of it is sort of like establishing very mundane routines in Istvan's life. I can't believe it's taken me this long to say the main character, but the main character is Istvan. He is Hungarian, and he moves to a couple different places. He's in London for a period of time. I'll get into all that in a second, but to go back, like, you can go back to each section of Istvan's life and you can see his routine at each moment in time, and that's something I'm thinking about a lot. Like, I'm in college right now. I spent 4 years in Wisconsin. At this time next year, I will not be in college, and, hopefully I'll be in a grad program or whatever, maybe not, but I won't be at Wisconsin. I won't be in this apartment. I won't be doing these same things that I've been doing day to day, going to the same coffee shops I've gone to, the same libraries I've gone to for years on end. And it's just like, it feels so normal and so ordinary and so whatever. But, in 10 years, I'll look back on this specific moment and be like, what the hell? Like, it becomes so incredible to think about your day-to-day routines. For me, that's looking back at high school or middle school or whatever, or like when I played sports or whatever the case may be. I think that only becomes more powerful as you grow older. And yeah, that was just really fascinating, because I spent a lot of time just sort of skimming through. It was a very powerful experience to go back to the sort of day-to-day life he had at all these different stages in time, which were all so incredibly different. But when you're in the moment, especially because Szalay is traversing such a large period of time within the one chapter, it feels like this routine is something you've been used to for 20 years or whatever, right? And then, you go back to it and it's like, wow, like that feels so unfamiliar, but at one point it didn't. It replicates life in a way that is extraordinary. It's not something I've ever quite seen. I thought this first chapter was the best one, easily. I mean, essentially what happens in the first chapter is, and I'm saying this because I don't think it's a spoiler, because I listened to some interviews with him before I read it, and I don't think it, ruined anything for me. If anything, I think it made me want to read it more. This character is very passive. He exemplifies masculinity in a way. At one point, somebody says to him, you exemplify like this old kind of masculinity, and you are everything that's sort of wrong with men. You are everything that's sort of wrong with the way that society functions as a patriarchy. And I think that this is something that we're able to see, like the things he does and the person he is someone you would, I feel, consider evil or like a bad person a lot of times. But what you see is this guy really moves through life without thinking about anything. Like he lets things happen to him, and he has a lot of hurt beneath the surface, but he just doesn't address it because he hasn't been taught how to deal with that. And so his response is sort of to move through life without any thought, any awareness, I don't really know how to explain it. And so this sort of letting things happen to him results in some really weird situations. In the beginning, he sort of like winds up, he, again, like 14 or 15, he ends up sleeping with this older woman, and that sort of derails his life in a way. Again, this is sort of all her doing things, and then the moment that he does sort of become aware, the moment he does kind of want something, everything gets ruined. And that is sort of the theme, I think, in the book. Like, it is almost better when he sort of lets the world happen to him. And I guess that's the best way to describe it. So I'm going to read some portions of this. This is from the second chapter. And this is basically, Istvan has returned from, I don't really want to say what it is, but I guess like a boot camp type boarding school situation. He is sort of back in the world, which he has been separate from for a while. And he sort of falls for this girl in a coffee shop. And it's not one of the more memorable chapters. I think I'm going back to it because, least spoilers, the writing is still very strong, and also it's one that I don't remember that well, so I think it'll be cool to read. But yeah, here, see if you see what I mean with the rhythm. I'm just going to read a little portion here. It's only yesterday that he saw her last, so why does it feel like he hasn't seen her for weeks? He walks into town. Through the warm evening, the Tex-Mex place is a garish cluster of lights in an otherwise dreary side street. He pushes open the glass door. She isn't there. He sees that straight away. The other waitress is there. "Hi," she says to him. It's still quite early and the place isn't full. He just stands there for a few seconds and then says, "Noemi not in?" The other waitress shakes her head. "I thought she works Wednesdays," he says. "She asked to swap," the other waitress says. "Yeah?" The other waitress nods. "Why?" "I don't know," the other waitress says. From the phone box on the corner, he tries her parents' house. Her mother answers. "She's out," she tells him, when he asks if Noemi's there. "I don't know where she is," she says in answer to his next question. Starting to sweat in the hot phone box, he asks her if she knows when she'll be back. "No," her mother says. He leaves a message for her to phone him when she gets in. She doesn't phone until the next morning. "Where were you last night?" he asks her. "Where was I?" "You weren't working." "I know." "So?" She laughs. "What's it got to do with you?" "Just wondering." "I was out." "Okay." "Seen someone." "Who?" "A friend." "A friend?" "Yeah, a friend." She says what she actually phoned to tell him was that she asked her stepbrother Mikey if she could borrow his car to drive to Balaton this Sunday, and he said yes. So this is there's so much happening in the white space of this book, whether it is between chapters, which sort of extensive periods of time are left out, and sometimes the most important periods. For example, he fights in a war, and he clearly has PTSD from that experience. Largely, it goes unaddressed. We basically pick up with him the day he is leaving the military, I believe. So that kind of thing. Also, the way that the dialogue functions, not much is told to us. So I realize that reading parts without the dialogue tags is kind of annoying, but when you sort of see this laid out on the page, there's a lot of yeses, a lot of okays, and a lot of repetition. So someone will say something and he'll respond with a question. Again, this is very, very weird, but it begins to become addictive. It's very fast to read, so you can get immersed in it very easily. And I do think it says something really interesting about the character. So that's one section. I do want to read another section where it'll be the beginning of a chapter. And this is sort of a larger event. Again, a lot of these things, I think you'll see the way that he sort of moves through this very significant event in his life. This sort of leads to a lot of the situations, this rags to riches and back to rags again story. And I say that ironically, but that takes place in this book. This is a very significant event in his life. It sort of comes out of nowhere. And it also is not something that he particularly recognizes. It is something that doesn't make a lot of sense, and he doesn't really care that it doesn't make a lot of sense for this man to be out here at this moment in time, as you'll sort of see. So this is a longer passage that I want to read, and this is the beginning of chapter 4. It's page 105, which is 1/3 of the way through. Tonight it's raining. He stands under the pert little awning where there's a patch of dry pavement. It tends to be quieter on rainy nights. There's something melancholy about them, the way that people hurry along the narrow street, hidden under umbrellas. The traffic squeezes past, showing the falling rain in its headlights. Later, the rain stops. After about 1 o'clock, there are fewer arrivals. It's mostly people leaving. So this is what I mean. I don't know if you can see that there. But these time jumps he takes with just one line are really interesting. It almost encapsulates a larger period of time. I don't really know how to explain that, but it's so fascinating to me. Then again here, at 3, he stops letting people in altogether. Not that there are many of them at that hour, especially on a weekday like today. There are sometimes a few, like these 3, still in yesterday's suits, although 2 of them have lost their ties, approaching loudly along the pavement, seeing the sign and deciding they want to go down. "We're closed," he says. One of the young men tries to offer him money. He has what looks like a 20 in his hand and is pushing it at him. Istvan shakes his head. The young man with the money persists. "Can't do it," Istvan says with his hands in his pockets. "What can't you do?" the young man says, laughing. "We're closed," Istvan says again. "What can't you do?" "He can't do it," the young man says to the others. "He can't do it." They're all laughing now. They walk away. He watches them go and lights a cigarette. The last patrons leave at around 3:30. He helps to throw them out. It smells of sweat down there and feels like a sauna after the damp freshness of the street. The lights are on, which makes the place look small. The main stage and the private ones at the sides look small and shabby. He makes his way to Freddie's office. He passes a few of the girls, leaving in tracksuits and raincoats, with earbuds in their ears, and "don't even think about talking to me" expressions on their faces. He doesn't talk to them. He finds Freddie in the office. "You weren't around earlier," Istvan says. Freddie looks tired. "No," he says. Istvan has no idea where Freddie's from. Not England. He might be Arab or something. Are there Arabs called Freddie? Something about it doesn't make sense. Freddie pays him. "Thanks," Istvan says. "No problem," Freddie says in his unplaceable voice. Pushing the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket, Freddie goes up the stairs. It's nearly 4. The streets are as empty now as they'll ever be, which isn't entirely empty, of course. There are still a few people around. He arrives at Cambridge Circus and starts to walk towards Tottenham Court Road and the night bus home. The illuminated top of Center Point is visible above the nearer buildings and through the branches of the trees. He knows this walk well. He does it every night that he's working. There are some tatty pubs, and then the huge bookshop with its faulty sign, some of the letters not lit, and after that, the dead-end street with the alley at the end. As he's walking past, he notices that something seems to be happening there in the alley. He stops in the light of the bookshop's display window and stands there for a few seconds, trying to work out what it is that he's seen. "Help," a voice says. The voice sounds strangely normal, like someone just neutrally saying the word. Maybe it's for that reason that he does nothing for a second or 2. Then he starts to move toward it, past the weakly lit display windows of the bookshop. "Hey," he shouts, which seems to be enough. two figures separate themselves from the darkness. He sees them as short-lived silhouettes against the end of the alley where there's the light of some other street. I think another thing that section does especially well is it shows how these quick descriptions are incredibly effective. And I'm not sure what it is exactly, because I don't always feel like when people talk about short, cutting prose, it's like Hemingway or whatever, and I never feel that I get into a Hemingway story in the way that I would like to. There's something about the way he sort of combines the sort of lengthy description that I like with the moment-to-moment conciseness that is just so wonderful. I just have to say, I love this book. There was maybe during the middle of it, I was like, I hope the style changes a little bit. But now that I'm thinking about it, like those sections I read you are much more descriptive than some of the other parts, which are more quicker, maybe just dialogue, maybe just like line breaks the whole time. So like reading 10 pages is almost the equivalent of reading 2. Yeah, this is a book I could not recommend anymore. My experience with this was really wonderful. I can't wait to read All That Man Is. I know that Szalay works in sort of the short story form in a way, like with pieces that work separately, but also individually, and that this is perhaps his most novel-y of his popular works, which would probably be the last 3. All That Man Is. My dad read that. He loved it. And that's something that essentially functions as a short story collection, but Szalay is like very insistent that it is not a short story collection, that it is something larger, if not a novel. So I guess just the way he works with form is really interesting to me. And I thought that in terms of the short story, the thing that I see in him that I think is really important for short story writers is the ability to put you in a place where you have no idea what's going on. Each chapter, like for example, that chapter that I just read, we're sort of slowly picking up, okay, this guy works the door outside of a strip club, right? Because that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is his job compared to other people's jobs, right? The sort of class dynamic, the sort of immigrant dynamic because he's in a different country. Race plays a big part. Eventually, money. Like, there are so many factors that are so much more important to the story. But the sort of discovery that happens, like where we are and what we're doing, is also is what sort of draws you into those factors, I think. Do you know what I mean? So I think he knows how to hook a reader's attention in, just really, really excellent way. And I listened to a talk he gave recently, sort of about how, people talk about literary fiction, people talk about serious fiction, but the most important thing is for fiction not to be boring. And I think if that's his goal, if his goal is to entertain, he has sort of written the perfect, super entertaining, also super interesting commentary, and a lot of that commentary is taking place in the white space. He really, really trusts the reader, and it was a really refreshing read. I really enjoyed this book, quickly becoming one of my new favorite authors. I can't wait to read All That Man Is. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Again, I spent a lot of time with this book just because I've been reading so much other stuff at the same time, but you can get through this pretty quickly. If you've read it, let me know what you think. If you've read some of his other stuff, especially All That Man Is, which I haven't read yet, let me know what you think. I will be back, hopefully in a couple days, with my thoughts on the D.H. Lawrence novel, which I loved. Still have a little bit left, but loving. And The Blindness of the Heart, which I did not love as much. Thank you all for watching. As always, have a great week, weekend, rest of your week. Peace.